Welcome to the Talk Spot. This is Marcus, and today I'm joined by Reuben Langdon. Reuben's been on several times, and today we're going to go full peanut butter. We're going to talk about what we've alluded to in other episodes, and we're going to go full into it. So, Reuben, thank you for coming on.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. Always glad to be
Perfect.
here.
Yeah. So let's just get right into it. So we've talked before about extra dimensionals. If you wouldn't mind, maybe just recapping them a little bit, and I guess the differences between them and extraterrestrials, what most people consider to be normal aliens, I guess.
Normal aliens. Is an alien
Yeah.
normal? That is the question. Um, so I actually have a show now. I've had the show for quite some time, but it's actually out on Gaia, the Gaia network. So if you have a Gaia subscription, go check it out. I think there's like 4 episodes out now or five, and they're releasing one new one every week. Um, so extra dimensionals. It really is just a label. Like we perceive extraterrestrials as coming from the stars. That's sort of in all of our Star Wars and all of these movies and everything else. The the idea is, this group. We even have contact experiences and contactees saying that they've experienced a uh, interaction on a ship or had some sort of telepathic communication, and the beings said they were from the Zeta Reticuli, or another set of beings may say they're from the Pleiades star system, and another set may say they're from the Arcturus from Arcturus, or in that star system. So what we have is sort of this idea that extraterrestrials come from outer space. When we're talking in more of the indigenous um, cultures and indigenous peoples from around the world who have had this sort of contact experience, and they have this in their history and in their legends and their lore, they also talk about the star people, and they sort of point up. But then the indigenous also work with other dimensional realm beings, and that typically how we label those dimensional realm beings. There's sort of like fairy or spirit beings in the woods, um, tree spirits, the druids, the devas, all of these sort of ideas of sort of old Earth, maybe that kind of Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. Like there's elves in the woods, but that's like another dimensional realm, someplace in a period a long time ago. Merlin the magician, and King Arthur, and those, and dragons, and this kind of stuff. So that we kind of can classify those guys as extra dimensionals in a way, or from another dimensional realm. But in reality, they're all the same. For dude from Arcturus to come here, he has to travel, he or she or they have to travel interdimensionally to get here. Why? Because to travel by the speed of light in a normal sort of, starship or space shuttle like craft that we would design, and try to get as close to the speed of light as possible, it still would take, how many light years? I forget how many light years. We could talk about Sirius, the closest one, right? It would still take 4 light years, 4.4 light years, or something like that, to get to Sirius and hang out with those guys in the physical form. But if you have control over gravity and you can sort of bend space and time, uh, you then can start to hop through sort of these dimensional realms. And what we understand, what we're starting to understand more and more through sort of quantum physics and quantum ideas, quantum theory, is that there are potential timelines simultaneously existing at the same time, and that they all exist, the past, the future, all exists here and now. And we sort of heard these ideas, and we've heard that there's infinite potentials, and they all sort of come into this focal point of our current existence. So when I first sought out the sort of the title of the show, and where my mindset was when I was setting out for this journey, I had produced the citizen hearing. We had done all of that, all of the people from different government officials and researchers and high-ranking folks coming and testifying. And the term we were using was extraterrestrials, that, human races being engaged by some sort of higher intelligence or extraterrestrial intelligence. And that was the label we were using. But as I got more into my own show and investigations and pursuing this idea, the beings themselves from Pleiades, from Arcturus, from all these different star systems actually told me in interviews that a better term would be extra dimensional. And that's where I'm going with all of my research, is going even deeper into that, these other dimensional realms, because we really have to sort of rethink how we perceive reality to get a better understanding of how all this can work. And that was a long answer to that one question, but hopefully you caught some of that.
No, no, I definitely think that is a very good, I guess, like definition of what we're talking about. But so you mentioned that this idea of ancient Earth, I guess, so to speak. So I guess, yeah, would you mind maybe going a little bit more into detail about that? Like, what are your theories or ideas of that, and to what extent are, like, let's say something like the gray aliens connected to the ideas of, dragons, or even let's say like reptilians, things like that, of maybe the past, or even I guess of contemporary world, or people that feel like they're seeing something. Like, how are all these things tied or connected?
So the glue that holds all of this together in my research is archetypal storytelling, archetypes. And when we look into the sky, we see all of these different stars, and we see constellations. And then people in the ancient days, we have astrology, and we have the story coming from the stars. We have the different, which I suck at. It's something I'm now getting more interested in, because I'm finding out that it truly is the our origin story and our future story, if you want to look at it from a slightly different perspective. But we come from the stars, literally, through the stories that are being told through the stars, through our archetypal storytelling and legends. We have a past version, I should say. We talk about King Arthur and these olden days of knights and chivalry, and defeating the dragon, and Merlin the magician. And this is sort of in our Western history and or I should say legends and story. And then in Asia they have there's different archetypes with sort of Hindu gods and these kinds of things with India. And then in China and Tibet and Asia they have their sort of lores and histories as well. But there's an overlapping story in all of them. And when you can look at the story of it, and when you can look at the actual A plus B equals C, these things happen, these events, this person kills that person, and there's the revenge, and then there's the the animal that comes to the rescue, or these, we have tons of these different legends. But that truly is the glue that holds all of us as beings on this planet together, because we're always repeating these cycles of history. And what we're doing to continue our evolution is we're trying to find a different way, a different answer, because we've already done that. We've already told that story. So how do we find a new story? And what the ET story is introducing to us is a concept or an idea of a third way, a new way of doing stuff, instead of the typical, hero villain. The hero defeats the villain and saves the day, and everybody's happy. Like, that story's been told to death. And now we're realizing, wait, what if the hero and the villain actually got along? Or what if there was no hero and villain? How does the world exist in that paradigm? And this is sort of this future story coming from the stars, again from the stars in a different manner now from through my interviews and through channelings and psychic connections, and then you can see that coming into our actual storytelling in the media. Like, how many more Marvel movies can you go through? Like, we're sort of done with that. We're ready for really good juicy stuff. Like Star Trek, Interstellar. These are space stories, but the reason the space stories are so compelling is because it gives us a new the no longer is the villain a some entity or some demon or some big star eater killer. The most of your really smart ones like Interstellar, the enemy is you, like you surviving in space in these harsh environments, exploring and going to different worlds. And Star Trek sort of does that and introduces other different races, but they sort of find this solution, outside of the box solutions for all of their issues. And this is I think what humanity is doing subconsciously. And so the archetype in the story, and I'm getting into these types of conversations in my more recent interviews. Once you follow my show, like this is truly what we can look to in our future stories from these, we call them ETs, EDs, angels, beings of higher frequency, fairies, whatever label you want to call them, gods. They are giving us information to further our evolution, and the information they're giving us is just a story. It's just simply somebody sitting down and telling a story, and that's what I love my interview with Ed series. Is I'm just like, okay, what's your story? What planet do you come from, and what are your characteristics, and how did you guys survive your go through your evolutionary stage?
So I guess there's certain grouping or certain names of, I guess, different types of aliens or EDs that are just thrown out there. There's the Greys, there's the Reptilians, there's the Syrians, but spelled differently. I guess, who are the main classes of these aliens or EDs, and I guess what are some of their characteristics, or what are some of the differences between, let's say, a Grey and a Syrian, or oh my gosh, what are they? There's also the Aryans too, right? The Aryans are the blonde hair, blue eyed ones.
Aryans,
Yeah.
the Palladians, yeah, as well. Palladians sort of get thrown into that blonde hair, blue eye section, but that's just different people interpreting different things. So there's sort of all of these different races. First and foremost, in my series, we get into it, and they're not sort of one specific race, because these star systems, the Palladian star system, the Sirius star system, which is our closest, and we're actually part of the Sirius star system. Actually, one of the channelings, we might soon find out that we're Sirius C. If there's a Sirius in the A and B, a binary star, we're actually a third, very distant component, but there is some gravitational pull, so to say, on Earth and its connections to Sirius. So we'll see what our scientists find out with that later down the road. But what I'm trying to say is that there's not one specific, blonde hair, blue eye race, or the Zetas sort of have this idea of what a Zeta is, but Zeta Reticuli is a big star system. So is Orion. So is Pleiades, as I said. And there's many, many different habitable planets in these star systems with many different types of evolutionary advanced beings. So whatever that planet's climate, think about our evolution, and think about how even people evolve with specific skin colors and pigments, and depending on where they are, what part of the world they're in, and their exposure to weather, and other animals, and how they've evolved according as well. So you have to sort of think about that. And there's really everything we have on Earth, every tree, every animal, think that there's got to be a star system out there that has a higher evolved version of that. So like a grasshopper alien or um, a tree alien, literally, with the billions and billions of, or I should say, infinite possibility of life out there, and different and billions of known stars that we already know, and we're pretty much sure that it's infinite at this point. Um, just imagine all of the different types of life on Earth. It exists. It's out there somewhere.
I guess a certain type of EDs that are often maligned are the reptilians, and you'll hear that in the media. There's always a perception that they're bad, essentially, or at least most people believe them to be bad that have heard of them. Do you think that that's actually the case? Are they, just from your research and just your own interactions with people and doing interviews? Do you think that they're actually like a bad force or an evil force, or is that just more just a talk and speculation?
Yeah, I think that's a human projection of that race, because let's take it back a few million years when um, Homo, what do you call it, erectus, just started coming out online, the Neanderthals and that stuff. Um, they had some pretty nasty reptilians to deal with in their day to day life. So a lot of times they're food, right? Humans were food for these larger creatures that ruled the earth back in the day. And I know there's a lot of controversy and talk about, wait, did humans exist during the dinosaur age? And I think there's more and more proof showing that there were some sort of type of humanoid at that point. Maybe not the Homo sapiens that we are now, for sure. We're not back in that day, but there was some type. So we have in us some DNA and some genetic traumas that we're still dealing with when it comes to the reptilians and just the reptilian energy in itself. So my take is, because of those traumas, we then project that reptilians are evil and bad. Let me tell you, there's hominoid species just like humans that are just as bad as those reptilians out there in the universe, in all types, whether it's a grasshopper or a blonde hair, blue eye, uh, gorgeous looking female or male. And I'm sure there's evil, nasty ones of those too out there that just are as evil and bad as the reptilians. But we just have this genetic fear trauma that we're dealing with. So that's my take on why that is.
So you mentioned the reptilian energy. It seems undeniable to me that across different cultures and societies, and even present day in the past, that there seems to be something attached to this idea of dragons and serpents, and there's some kind of symbolism about that invokes either whatever power or fear. What do you think exactly? I mean, do you think it's all tied back to the idea that you said, or is there something? I guess, is there something more to it? I mean, I know that a lot of people are very into the idea of studying symbols and the powers of symbols and what symbols
Mm-hmm.
mean. Do you think that all the serpent imagery and I guess iconology? Do you feel like is there something more to it than just simply, you know, people have they're fearful of giant serpents. They're fearful of an anaconda.
Sure. Yeah, this goes very deep into who we are. Yes, the one thing is the projection about the reptilians. The other is our galactic history, which we as again, I can't confirm or deny any of this stuff. Or I should say, I can't confirm any of this stuff. I would. This is sort of the story I'm going with now, because it all matches up with a lot of research through interviewing different channeled material, as well as contactee material, people who've been claimed to be on board ships and had different experiences, who aren't necessarily channelers, but they also come up with this, is that one of our main root races is from Sirius. And we'll hear all kinds of stories about this. This is one of the big archetypes. And when you look into the sky, Sirius is tied into the snake constellation. I don't think it's Draco, but Draco's somewhere else. But there we have all of this lore and legend and symbol in our society, and if you trace it back, it sort of goes back to Sirius, and that's a big aspect of who we are. Um, and we label this reptilian energy with a negative label, but like I said, I think the negative label is probably coming from our past traumas here on Earth, but there's probably been some traumas in, in prior to our seeding of the planet with the Sirius, with these Syrian beings. But you also have to look, on the other side of the world in China and Asian lore, dragons are revered. They're not these evil, evil doers like we see in the Western sort of lore and legend and like Game of Thrones and stuff. So they were revered and sort of looked up to and bringers of wisdom, and those sort of traits sort of match back and forth with Western and Eastern. But it's sort of a different take. And you have to ask, okay, well, if they have a different take, then why is that? Let's go deeper into what is the serpent symbology. We have the caduceus that we see in our medical field. There's the Uroboros, the serpent that's eating its tail, with deep meanings in that, and many cultures around the world sort of utilizing that symbol and that idea. So I'm not a scholar in the serpent ideas and stuff, but I'm just sort of skimming on the surface of what I've come across through doing my series and research. And I encourage anybody who's interested in this to really research it, because it is, in my belief, connected to where we come from.
Do you think, I guess, how would you say that EDs connect to something like urban legends, or the idea of, the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or Sasquatch or something like that? Or even, I'm not sure if you're familiar with David Paulides' work, Missing 411, where he talks about, or he's written extensively about people disappearing in national parks.
I think I have heard about that.
I've listened to,
not in
I've
detail.
listened to a number of his interviews talking about the subject, and it always just blows me away. It literally sounds like people are disappearing. But I guess anyways, back to the idea of, are these
yeah, I've asked that question actually in my interviews, and it comes it so far, I always go back to my interviews because they actually make the most sense out of any other sort of theory or urban legend type. Well, not urban legend, but just people like throwing stuff out there, like it just hits home every time I hear an answer. And for example, the Bigfoot and the Sasquatch actually exist, but they exist on another dimensional plane of existence. This is why they sort of come and go and disappear. They're there 1 minute and then they're not. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why in the forest we see them only in these specific areas mostly? And it's because in the forest, these underdeveloped areas, there are different vortexes, different energies mixing and matching. You may have heard of ley lines or power spots or vortexes across the world that have certain energy spots. And we're Sedona, Arizona is like one of these main ones that we're familiar with, and there's other areas, the Four Corners, and even on the East Coast, in that area, there's like what's that? Arkansas. In Arkansas, there's like crystal caves and things that people go to. But truly, all over the world, there's amazing energy spots where the energy sort of swirls up, and the veil between these different dimensional realities becomes thin, and stuff can seep through both ways.
Yeah, that is, yeah, because obviously a lot of people, they'll talk about the fact of, well, if the Bigfoot of Sasquatch, if he existed, how come we haven't found a skeletal remain or the Loch Ness monster is the same thing.
Right.
Well, how could it fit here or there? But and especially I'm not as familiar with the Loch Ness monster investigations, but I know for Bigfoot, I mean, there's been a number of people that, I mean, that's like their life is looking for Bigfoot.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. I think they're never going to find them, but but they can find traces, of course, and when you so to make all this make sense, this sort of talk, I do a panel called "What is Reality," and I break down my understandings of the construct of reality, which I break down quantum physics, and Nikola Tesla saying that everything is energy, vibration, and frequency. And when you can see the world from that lens, all of this makes sense. Because as I don't know if you've seen those vibrating plates that when you take certain frequencies and they start forming different geometry. It's called cymatics. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm a little familiar, but maybe if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
maybe explaining a little bit more.
Well, you can go and type in cymatics on YouTube, and you can find a ton of these videos of people putting on a speaker or a vibrational plate. They'll play certain harmonics, certain hertz frequencies, and at different hertz, then the geometry just shifts automatically. You put sand on a vibration plate, sand or salt or rice or whatever, and based on the frequency, the salt will just start to take form instantaneously. So this is sort of proof that harmonics create form. Harmonics and frequencies can create a specific type of geometry. And our entire universe is based on geometry, math, right? So when you think about the frequency is interacting, the frequency is the math. It's all sort of symbiotic and connected, but depending on the frequency is what the actual geometry is formed, or our reality. So our reality is a bunch of pixels or fractals sort of forming themselves to make a specific geometrical experience, and it's all vibrating. And this goes into string theory at so rapidly that our eyes can't see how rapidly it's going, but it's going a billion times a second. The frequency is sort of tuning and humming, and the Earth is tuned to the Schumann resonance, which is about 7.7 ish frequency, 7.3, and that's sort of at a constant hum. But lately we've been getting bombarded with different frequencies, and there's pockets on Earth that have been going way higher than the Schumann resonance and then coming back down, and then way higher, or the entire Earth there's measurements around the Earth right now that you can actually go on websites and find the Schumann resonance of today, and you'll see we've been getting plummeted by all kinds of frequencies. And this is part of this ascension that is talked about during all of these interviews. Is Earth is going through this massive ascension, evolution, like a big evolutionary jump, so to say, than prior in its history. It has done these prior before, but sort of the window is there for this evolutionary jump to happen if we don't destroy ourselves. And coming from that frequency vibration standpoint, when everything in these other dimensional realms are sort of vibrating at their frequencies, when you go to these spots on the planet that are vibrating at a specific frequency, they're close enough to these other realms and their frequencies, so then an actual dimensional door or gateway can be formed, a natural one, as opposed to using some sort of technology or even a conscious, meditators who can do astral traveling and these kinds of things. There's an actual natural dimensional door opened, and that's when the boogeyman can come through. Whether it's and Skinwalker Ranch, which my buddy Jeremy did a documentary on. That's another vortex spot. But that's how it works. These dimensional doorways are created, and Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, ET, you know, dragons, whatever. They'll pop in for a minute, and then they'll go back out their door, or phase into another existence because, or back into their existence because there's a lot of different elements that are required to make that gateway open.
So you mentioned Skinwalker Ranch. Would you mind maybe talking a little bit more about that? And I know that there's been several different. I know there's a ton of videos on YouTube about it, talking about it, and but it's always been kind of more of a creepy way that I've seen it portrayed. It's one of those let's
Sure.
read kind of thing where it's kind of a spooky thing. But yeah, maybe if you wouldn't mind maybe talking a little bit about it. Is it a government facility or
Well,
is it a literal
it,
ranch?
it used to. It used to be not a government per se, but Bob Bigelow had hired a team of scientists that they call them NIDS, and I forgot what it stands for, but he had bought the property and installed NIDS on there for several years to do research. And the best thing to do is go watch my buddy Jeremy's documentary, The Hunt for Skinwalker Ranch. It's on iTunes. It's on, I think it's on Netflix as well. For sure on iTunes and Vimeo. Check that out, and that'll give you the lowdown on that and sort of the interconnections that our government has had with that. Bob Bigelow being hired, Bigelow Aerospace being contracted out by certain government agencies. That ATIP program that has been declassified and made the New York Times a couple years ago. That I still can't believe why anybody doesn't believe in this stuff anymore, because like it's the Pentagon has released the that program, the files and videos, and we have amazing documentary journalism by guys like George Knapp and Jeremy, who have just basically like, here it is, guys. There's no more, like Jeremy says, you no longer have the luxury for disbelief. It's like, it's all there if you want to just watch a video. It's not even classified anymore. So it's just one of these strange spots, that hot spots, like many on this planet, like I was just saying, that there's been a lot of activity. Strange things from UFOs to the skinwalkers, which is a term from indigenous peoples there, who said the skinwalkers were like these shadow people that came out at night and did some not so nice things. And then there's been cattle mutilations on the ranch. There's been all kinds of goofy stuff. But I highly recommend going watch Jeremy's documentary to get the full scoop.
You mentioned that it's just one of many hotspots. What are some other, I guess, popular hotspots that exist that that I guess are or unclassified, or things that
Stonehenge, the Great Pyramid, down in South America, there's a lot of there's a reason these pyramids are being built in these certain spots. So any kind of pyramid spot, even a lot of churches down in South America were built on top of indigenous people's sort of their sacred spots. They purposely went and destroyed whatever temple that they had there and then built the church on top in order to get followers into the church. And they put a little sun in the entrance of the church because back in the day, a lot of these different cultures, Aztecs and Mayans and whatnot, sort of worship the sun. But you can definitely go and all over the place. And Malibu is got some interesting activity. The Topanga Canyon, there's been a lot of activity over there. If you're in LA and want to go someplace close, I get activity up here in Big Bear. There's a few spots within the mountains that are a little bit more. The veil is thinner than in other spots, for sure. And you have energy sensitive people out there who can actually feel these spots. They'll be walking and they can sort of like, oh yeah, this is something special about this place.
Well, talk a little bit more about Topanga, because I personally don't live very far from there, and I've been on Topanga Canyon a number of times on the road, and I've driven there. I've driven on that to Malibu. Yeah, I guess if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about what you know about Topanga Canyon, and obviously Topanga.
I actually can't say much because I
Okay.
don't know. I just know that I know that there's some ancient Indian land out there, and they held ceremonies. They did some, uh, it's sacred land. So when, vortexes, a lot of them are, some of them are natural, just natural phenomenons, but a lot of them have been created by us, by humans, through ceremony, through, you know, why is a church so sacred? It's because people go there to worship. They go there to sort of give high vibrations, right? Even in a church, even in a Christian sense, you're going there to ask for forgiveness, to ask for guidance, and to pray. And these are all high vibrational things to do. So you're actually creating an intention. You're putting out an intention, creating frequencies, and then putting out this vortex. And then when you do that in numbers, just like in the Bible says, when two or more are gathered together, miracles can happen, right? So that's what's happening all the time.
Well, I think with Topanga Canyon, I think a lot of people might not know this that don't live in the area, but Topanga Canyon touches Box Canyon, which is where Charles Manson's like cult was. Yeah,
Mm.
there's a lot of it's a really interesting spot. I think a lot of people, the one big question that they have about ETs or EDs is how are they connected to the Illuminati? I mean, obviously the Illuminati is it's a very talked about subject nowadays. How
Yeah, it's interesting how it's gotten that way. But quick, I can give you my quick take on the
yeah.
Illuminati. It's just it's simply yes, it's sort of the secret societies, the Illuminati. These we've heard about these sort of ideas, especially lately. And all it is again, like I said, you can use these powers and these ideas and these calling upon the other dimensions, these other realms, for good or for evil. And there is access to um, different dimensional realms that are not that don't have the best intentions for humanity. Now, the really, really bad stuff, like an alien invasion or anything like that just most people can get that out of their head. That's not going to happen. There's too much interest in humanity from these other dimensional realms to let something like that happen, or a thermonuclear war that would devastate the planet. Maybe pockets of the planet might get taken out, but an entire human race getting wiped out, don't really see that happening. But sort of the doorway to these other realms to let bad stuff happen, so to say, what we would label bad, it's there and can be accessed. And yeah, people are doing it. People are doing it for nefarious reasons. People are going into these other dimensions and gathering information, bringing it back here to, like I said, do nefarious things to not to better themselves, more of a self-serving idea than to be of service for all of humanity.
Because I mean, obviously, it's an idea very much promoted in the X Files and things from the '90s, but this whole idea of the Illuminati working closely with these beings that are outside our realm of existence. Do you think something like that could really be going on where there it's like the smoking man, for example, in X
Sure.
Files, yeah, where he's literally,
Yeah.
you think like a situation like that could, like, it has potential to be going on?
Ab- Absolutely. Absolutely. Just as I'm gathering information from what I would call higher vibrational intelligences or beings, I'm tapping in and getting information that can better myself, better society. That sort of has these messages, just as I'm doing in my series, but I also do it in my own meditations, and connect with ideas and energies and concepts that can help elevate humanity. And then, yeah, of course, you have the opposite end of the spectrum. You have others who may want to bring humanity down for purposes of, who knows what the motivation is behind some of these people. It goes beyond my thinking and capacity, but I'm sure they've got their own logic and justification for doing the things that they do.
Recently on television and even at the gym, they've had on Men in Black recently a lot. Like Men in Black 2 was on the other day, and last night was Men in Black 1. It was on TNT. And something I've always wondered with the Men in Black is I've heard it said both ways, that the Men in Black are either a government organization, they're just normal human beings that just, they work for the government. They're just some secret organization under the government. But I've also heard a number of people believe that the Men in Black are themselves aliens disguised as human beings. And I listened to some videos and read some things about how people will see the Men in Black show up in driving, cars from the 50s, and they act very bizarre. Have you studied them at all? And I guess from your own opinion, do you think they're just human beings, or are they something a little different?
In my peanut butter world, anything goes, man. I haven't studied them thoroughly. I've done a little bit of research and come across some things. I think they could be both. I think they could be. I think what you have in this world, and this is testimony from several different people, is you have the woo woo, extraordinary things happening. Extra dimensional beings, Zeta Reticuli or whatever, coming down, taking samples of semen and whatever, they're doing their thing, and then that same exact person will then have again be taken in the middle of the night, but this time there's people operating on them, but they're actually humans, and they're trying to figure this out, and their memories are vague, and they get hypnotic regression, and they say, well, no, that was a human. So, and what I've been finding out is that this is in the past, maybe not so much now, that during the hybridization programs, and I know you're going to ask what that is next, but we'll just say during the big part of the hybridization programs that was happening sort of in the 80s and 90s, a lot of people were getting taken. And there's a lot of stories of government folks going in, taking the same people after they've already been taken once, and sort of getting chipped or getting having operations and things done. And that was because our government had ways of tracking who got taken, and then they were interested in the technologies. They were interested in the implants that were being put in, or trying to figure out more about them. So there was this double abduction thing going on, and a lot of people were thinking that was a screen memory. Were they just having these images of these grays because they were taken and it was traumatic, or what's going on? And it gets very complicated, but when you really sift through it all, it does seem like there was the story that I just laid out seems to be the most probable.
So you talked about how a lot of the hybrid interactions were happening a lot in the 80s and 90s. I hadn't heard those 2 decades specifically said, but I mean, I've heard some of the stories about how, even men would report being abducted, and they're on a table, and then all of a sudden, an alien would come and, have sex with them almost, or, certain women, at least from the stories, or at least the videos that I've seen where the women are talking about it, sometimes it sounds a little bit more traumatic, where, they're basically artificially inseminated. But for these hybrids, and I mean, if we're talking about people that were abducted or taken, and then if hybrids were made in the 80s or 90s, I mean, we're talking now, there could be people that are alive that are 30s or 40s, or almost 30s or 40s, that potentially could have been a part of this. Do you think that, I guess with the hybrids, I guess the first question is, why do you think that they kind of slowed down a little bit? And the second question would be, and I know this is, this is unprovable, but how many people do you think are actually hybrids? And what are some ways to tell if you are or aren't a hybrid?
Well, I don't think, in the sense that you're asking, I don't think anybody really truly is a hybrid on this planet
Mm.
yet. But yet we're all hybrids. So, the human race itself is a major mix of interstellar DNA. And I'm saying this as a matter of fact because this is my belief from my research. But again, this is all stuff that's come through my research and through my channeling movies and TV show that I have. So you can check that out. But I just wanted to clarify that I believe it. I'm not expecting you guys to believe it as a matter of fact. This is, you guys got to do your own research. But we come from, a whole big pot of DNA. And we were sort of seeded on this planet. And then, so when it came time for the hybrid race, the hybrid programs that sort of happened, and they're still ongoing, but their big take, I guess, in the 80s and 90s was, let's see, mostly. Let's see. What was? Let's get to a little more deeper with your question, because I could go on this subject all day.
Get you. Well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess ultimately the I guess idea that I really want to convey or ask about is with
Mhm.
these, I guess, these hybrids, because I've heard, I mean, I listened to a couple of videos on Guy where they're talking about, people coming to this realization when they're, in their 30s or 30-year olds or whatever. And, they begin to realize, okay, there's something different about me, or there's something unique, or there's something weird about my past that doesn't necessarily line up. I guess for these people, I mean,
Oh, okay.
are the people that are, I guess, the result of, either themselves, or they're the result of some kind of, testing that happened, or they themselves were people that were abducted. I mean, are these things that really impact these people's lives? Because I mean, I've heard certain stories, especially people that, yeah, have been
Oh,
abducted, where,
definitely. Yeah, definitely impacting their lives for sure. People have been traumatically scarred and like live with this stuff, deeply. Like some people can't even function in public, um, because they believe, and we don't have a whole lot of evidence to prove it, but they believe that, these things have happened to them. And what's interesting is, when I interview these people, and you interview, 10 people over here and 10 people over there, and these 10 people don't know each other, but their stories are matching up. So there, that's what starts to happen when you dive deep into this. You're like, oh wait, there's something to this. If that guy doesn't know that guy, but they're telling the same story of being on a ship, and the details that are coming through, like the color of the other person that he saw on the ship, of their clothes at that time, and they've never met, but then yet they meet at the first time, and the other person is able to finish the other person's sentences because they saw each other on the ship and they met there prior to actually seeing each other in person.
mm,
And when you have those types of situations happening, then you're kind of like, okay, yeah, something's to this. So these people who are really being, traumatized, or say that they've been, that certain things have happened to them, and they're special or whatever, a lot of it is not exactly the way they're saying it.
mm,
A lot of it is because of the trauma, because of the difference in dimensional realms. So it's like a dream. Like when you go to bed at night and you try to remember the dream the next morning, like your memory recall of it that morning is going to be different than that night, and then 2 days in a year. Even if you write it down, you're going to start remembering it a little bit differently. And it's because in that other dimensional realm, like it's not what we're in right now. It's not in this cohesive experience this simultaneous experience that we're all experiencing right now. This is its own dream. When you go into the other dreams, they're hazy. So people bring back memories, some of them exact and they match up, but some of them are sort of fuzzy and not really matching up exactly what the other person is saying. but kind of.
Hmm. In your, I guess in your research and interviewing people, have you met any individual that has been able to, I guess, resist the power of the abductors? Because I mean, again, just from the little bit that I've heard, oftentimes people will say that they felt paralyzed, or they couldn't, they basically couldn't move. They couldn't do anything. They just, whatever. They were lifted off their bed and they were sucked in a ship, or they woke up and they were on an operating table, or whatever the story may be. Have you interacted with people or talked to people that said, I was actually, you know, they try to get me and I pushed them away? I mean, have you heard anything like that where somebody was actually fully in control of their body?
Yes, there's been a few cases where people have gotten rambunctious, so to say, in the abduction scenario, and but they were quickly subdued. Um, but more importantly, people who I've talked to several people now at this point who were getting taken nightly and not able to sleep and just having a really bad life. Like their life was not going well because these experiences happened every night and they didn't know how to who to talk to and how to explain them. Um, and then all of a sudden, they would sort of get fed up and say, "I'm done with this. I don't want this in my life anymore." But then they said they sort of say they command them that they're not allowed back. Like I'm done with this. You don't come into my life anymore. And then it stops. And I've heard that story from several people. So you can basically just say, apparently the free will thing, they honor that quite well. And you'd say, well, why are the people even experiencing this at all? And that's because it's a soul contract. And that specific statement is what got me interested in all of this. When I heard the soul contract, that was the first thing that actually made sense to me during all of my research into the abduction phenomenon for years. And it was around when I was producing the Citizen Hearing when I heard that term, which made me understand things a lot better and dive deep.
Wait, so you're calling it the soul contract?
A soul
Okay.
contract. So on a soul level, we make all kinds of agreements to live our lives in a certain way, to have certain things happen to us, so we can learn lessons, right? So we can evolve and take the information that we learn during this human incarnation, this experience, and give it back to the greater, all that there is, God. Or think of it like if God is a lake and we're just droplets of water, and we're going out and experiencing what it's like to be a drop of water out in the sand or in the ocean or in well, I shouldn't say the ocean, but out in the sky, or on in a dog's mouth, and then coming out the other end, and what is all that like, right? And then we go back into the big lake at the end of the day, we become ice, all kinds of things. Um, so that's sort of what our experience here in this realm is to to gather all this information, to feel what it's like to rub up against the sand, to evaporate into the air and become tiny particulates, and then to reform all back again together into the lake. Uh, that's the human experience. So we make contracts before we go into our particle, our individual selves, and we sort of say, okay, God, I got this mission, I'm gonna go do these things, and wish me luck. And we have free will as the individual droplet to sort of navigate and change the story a little bit, but the greater God that is back there saying, hey, don't forget your contracts. Don't forget what you said. You said you're going to do all this stuff for us, right? And gather this information and do this thing and have that experience. And then we're like, oh yeah, sorry, we got a little sidetracked. We got too caught up in the game. It's so much fun, rubbing against these rocks and getting eaten by the dog and going on all these adventures. It's just crazy fun. So I'm sorry, we got off track a little bit. Let's get back on our mission so we can get this information back to God. and that's the soul contracts involved as us humans. We made a contract before incarnating into this body that we would donate some of our, essence to these beings to help them out with their evolution. And in turn, they'll help us out with our evolution. And everybody's happy.
Mm.
Or not.
So let's just say hypothetically, if, let's say an abduction was going to happen, right? And let's just say by some weird turn of events, let's say an ED was somehow jumped by a couple humans, right? And they somehow captured one of them, right? I mean,
Okay.
what do you think would happen? I mean, would the government send out guys to make those people like shut up essentially, or would it make big news? I mean,
Well, you have the classic case of Travis
okay,
Walton. I don't know if you've heard that, the Fire in the Sky movie. Did you ever see that
I
movie
have
or heard of that
not. This is
movie?
this is all new territory to me right now.
Oh, okay, go check it out. I mean, it's sensationalized a lot, but it's based on the true story of Travis Walton, who got taken in the middle of the night in the forest, but was seen being taken by his fellow loggers. They were logging in the Arizona woods, and I've met Travis. He's healthy. He's old, but doesn't look it. I forgot his actual age, but he still is young and in good shape. And he basically ran into an accident. Apparently, the way he describes it and the way others sort of have concluded that he stumbled on some ETs doing some field work out in the woods, probably collecting some samples or something, and got walked into their beam and got blasted, and then he went missing for 2 days while they did some repair work on him,
Mm.
and then they put him back, and then he made headlines because everybody said the truth. They all took lie detector tests and said our buddy got zapped and then taken aboard a ship, and we ran, and then he was gone for 2 days, and then he shows up healthy as can be, and they obviously did something to him because he's you know getting up there in age, but still looking pretty prime, good health.
So when you say he got blasted, I mean, do you mean like a energy beam of some kind, like hit his body?
Yeah, that's what he describes it. He kind of like got hit by something, and then this light came and took him up or something, or took his body or something of that extent. I feel like I don't think the movie. I'm remembering the movie, but he describes it a little bit differently in his
Hmm.
book.
Well, I guess part of the reason why I asked that question is, do you think that there's a concerted effort? I mean, I know that there's already been some disclosure, but is there still the concerted effort to hide this information, like to hide?
Oh yeah, definitely to hide because I mean we're in a calling it slow disclosure. It seems like the powers that are right now are wanting this information out, but are also doing it at a very slow drip procedure in a way not to freak people out, and there's been different factions within the government trying, some who want to keep it a secret, some who want it out, and these factions still aren't in 100% agreement. So you have some that are peppering it out, some that are getting it out really well, and a lot of maybe this is more in the past. There was a few TV shows and Hollywood productions and things like that some that would actually get a little boost, to the writer or to I guess, or the opposite. If the writer was getting too close to home on some things, then they would get a little knock on the door and say, "Hey guys, you need to change a few things." So we have these different interest groups, right? That are some are trying to get the information out, some are not. But right now, it's really up to us, individuals, to sort of do our own research. And the more we're ready for this information, and the more we're going to accept it without freaking out, without calling it a demon and trying to, be in fear, because it is inevitable. But it's not going to happen if we're all afraid of it, and if we're all gonna create havoc. The War of the Worlds scenario, the Orson Welles radio show that went on way back in the day. Like, people freaked out and started rioting, and I think some people even died at that experience. So they're sort of evaluating and checking to see where humanity is. But right now, I mean, what do you think? What do you think if the government just came out and said, well, they have kind of, but like officially, like Trump says, hey, everybody, ETs are amongst us. They've been coming and going, and live with it. People would freak. It would be, the stock markets would crash. The economy would not exist as we know it. People would, start harboring guns and going crazy because of all the, conspiracy crap about, oh, the aliens are going to come and invade us and they're going to get us and take us. And it would just not be a pretty picture. So the ETs themselves, as well as I think the governments who want this information out, they want to do it in a nice, easy, palatable way so people can sort of digest it and not run for the hills.
I mean, I think you're totally right in regards to the slow disclosure part. I mean, it's almost like with the whole idea of the Illuminati. And I mean, I remember 10 years ago, I did a presentation in class, or in an English class I was in, talking about how, MK Ultra was a thing that was out there, that the government tried this.
Yeah.
And, I talked about Sirhan. And I remember talking about this presentation or giving it, and no one had heard any of this stuff before. The idea of mind control or MK Ultra or the Illuminati, no one had ever heard any of this stuff before, at least in that classroom. And now, I mean, that's like a popular thing. I mean, especially younger people.
Yeah, we had CIA declassified a bunch of MK Ultra files recently, right?
I mean, it's almost a thing now where everyone kind of knows that it exists. I mean, people, or, there was something in the past, and I think you're right that there was the slow disclosure about that. And I think there could be a slow disclosure about this too, especially, with the Freedom of Information Act. I mean, more stuff is kind of trickling in. And you're probably right. I mean, one day, I don't know if the government will ever come out and say, oh yeah, the Illuminati's real. I mean, I don't know if they'll do that exactly, but I mean, it'll get to be a point where, there probably will be some kind of, there probably will be more disclosure as time goes by.
Yeah, I think sooner than later. I think we're in this sort of hyper accelerated evolutionary stage right now, and people are waking up very fast, and it's like the 100th monkey effect. And what I've noticed just in the past year, and maybe Q is part of this, all of this is interconnected, is people are sort of figuring things out and coming to realizations that we can't keep doing this old game. And they're like coming online, like in getting the amount of information that it's taken me, 7 to 10 years to research and find out. Like, they get it in like 5 days or 1 month. They're like, oh, I had this amazing awakening and I get this and I understand and I see all the things. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So if that keeps happening at the rate it is, in fact, I think it's just going to increase. It's all exponential. We're going to see massive data jumps from our history to who we are on this planet to, especially with the government ET cover-ups and all that stuff. That's going to continue to accelerate faster and faster. But to really figure out who we are on this planet, where we came from, the real human history, like, just think about all the manipulation that's been going on in that realm with religions and things. So when we find out that for real, then that's, just thinking of our lifetimes. If we go back, if we have ET contact that actually says, well, hey guys, here's the real story, we're probably going to believe it because they're, way higher evolved. They're going to sort of show us all of our evolution and all the different things how it all happened. And then we're going to have a whole complete new story of who we are, where we come from. And then now what's next. So all of this big evolution shift is going to happen very quickly, in my belief. And also the fact that you see this massive push for, like we were just talking about earlier, that, for these clicks and for sort of the wrong reasons, right? You see people getting into media and stuff for not doing true journalism, but just, let's just get some clicks on a YouTube page so I can make some money. We sort of set up an environment in a society to do that, and all the integrity has been thrown out of journalism. But in reality, all of this stuff that's happening with politics, journalists, Illuminati, Q, all of this stuff coming to the surface, it's happening so fast, so we can clear it and sort of move on. It's like, okay, thank you. All this stuff was sort of been hiding under the surface. We've been sort of walking along the street and smiling at our neighbor, but underneath we're like, oh, that guy, I'm gonna, his lawnmower's way better than mine, or whatever it is, right? So we're sort of done with that. We can sort of like look at his lawnmower and say, dude, you got an awesome lawnmower. You want to come check out my lawnmower, and we can all be buddies about this instead of having this subdued, pushed in, hidden and resentment against all these different things, which is in reality just stuff that we haven't dealt with in our own realities. It has nothing to do with the guy's lawnmower or the guy next door. It's just stuff that I haven't resolved in my own being, but we're sort of figuring that out now, and a lot of people are doing a lot of inner work to resolve this stuff. And as they do, we all get to interact and get to start connecting to our space family.
I don't want to necessarily muddy the waters with, going into a total different topic than we already mentioned already, or what we've been discussing today. But yeah, just the idea of, journalism in general, or the idea of, news being produced. It's just so diluted today. It's basically, and what you alluded to earlier, the idea of, YouTube clicks. That's literally all of what the media is today. Is these ideas of it, if
Sure.
it bleeds, it leads kind of things. But it's one thing, when that expression was really popularized in the 70s or the early 80s. It's, if it bleeds, let's really focus on it. But now, it's even gotten to the point now where you watch mainstream media, and they're not even talking news; they're talking just commentary. That's all they're doing is, they talk a topic.
Sure, it's just opinions.
Yeah, and I feel like too with the media, they do so much priming where it's, think about this, we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about, Joe Biden being a weirdo, and then the other day we're going to talk about Michael Avenatti. And it's not to say that those stories are the most important ones. It's also not to say that they're unimportant, but there's other things happening every day.
There's way more important stuff happening on the planet.
I would probably say this is maybe a good end to part one. Maybe you could pick up part two another time. Something like that. All right, Ruben.
Sweet.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on, and I look forward to doing part two of this.
All right, likewise.
I'll talk
Thanks,
to you later.
Marcus. Take care.
I'll talk
Thanks,
to you later.
Marcus. Take care.
I'll talk
Thanks,
to you later.
Marcus. Take care.
I'll talk
Thanks,
to you later.
Marcus.